Oh, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a afternoon edition of Iowa Pagan News on the Prairie Land Radio Network. And again, I also have to say thank you to my good friend Virginia Ackley, who's been so kind enough to do all the intros for us here on the show. So I definitely want to say thank you to her. This afternoon, I am joined by my special guest, Amanda Mallard, and she's doing a variety of different things. She's a wife, mom, gamer, Celtic pagan. She also does her own uh, blog. And now, do you also do your own podcasting as well?
Kind of. So what I do is I actually stream on Twitch,
Hmm.
and I do a podcast like setup. I just started streaming again about 2 weeks ago. So I started with a couple of segments called Witchy Wednesdays and Spellcraft Saturdays. So Wednesdays are where I kind of talk about witchcraft as a journey and a spiritual path, and then Spellcraft Saturdays. The first one we had was me just telling people how to craft and write your own spells and what kind of components go into those.
Very good. Now, I want to thank all of you for tuning in to Iowa Pagan News. And if you have questions for us, be sure to click on the live video link there on Facebook so that you can come join us in chat. And we hope that you're able to leave with something that you have learned, because it seems like every guest that I wind up having, I'm always learning something new. So this is something really good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the both of us have been looking forward to this interview today.
Yes, very much so. I've been super excited. So
Very cool. Now, so tell me a little bit more about your uh, your blog here, which is hollowscauldron.com.
yes. So the blog is something that I started up, I believe it was last April. And it was just kind of a passion project at first. I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do with it. I wanted to do, book reviews because I really like to read. And then I kind of morphed it into talking about my journey as a mom, especially with my daughter. My daughter has autism and ADHD. So I've been talking a little bit
Mhm.
about that. I've been talking about being a witch, which is something different for me because when I was first starting out, it was you don't talk about it at all. Don't talk about being
Right.
pagan. Don't talk about being a witch. So it's been really interesting to kind of share that journey so far.
Now I can understand that.
Mhm.
What was your upbringing like?
So I actually started off, it's funny because I wouldn't say that I grew up in a Christian household. My dad had been, when he was younger, training to be a Baptist minister. My mom grew up in a kind of an eclectic household. Her mom was Presbyterian Presbyterian or Lutheran. I can't remember which. And then her dad was an unorthodox Jew. So it was a very, very interesting household she grew up in. So they never really spoke about religion with us unless
Hmm.
I we asked them. Um, they had kind of an extreme reaction when I told them I was a witch. I first decided and kind of found my spiritual path as a witch when I was, I want to say 14. Yeah, my freshman year of high school. And they decided that I had to be 18 before I could make a decision like that. So I needed at least 4 years more of research, which still, it's funny, it's not enough for me. I keep learning new things and picking up new books and trying to learn something else. And it's really
Hmm.
been crazy.
So, do you meet with a group at all, or are you a part of a group?
I am part of a group. So I live out here in Las Vegas, Nevada. I am part
Hmm.
of the group Sin City Witches, which is
Okay.
run by Marissa D'Aradia.
Yep. Know
And
her.
then I'm also part of the Facebook group I Witches. I'm one of the moderators for that group, actually, and that's going 350 some thousand strong. It gets crazy. So I'm part of that group. I do hang out with the Sin City Witches when I'm able to, but for the most part, I'm a solitary. I've been solitary for most of
Hmm.
my practice.
Excellent. So, uh, yeah, I know Marissa very well.
Mhm.
She and I had a conversation here not too long ago. Got to know her and what she's doing down there in Vegas.
Mhm.
And I gotta admit that there is a lot larger community down there in Vegas than what I thought there was.
Yeah, me too. I was really surprised. I don't remember. I think I found the group Sin City Witches on meetup.com, and it blew my mind because I'd been kind of looking for a group where I could, because I'd found a couple of groups out here. Nothing against them. My personality didn't mesh very well with those groups. And that's something
Hmm.
I like to tell people a lot, is that you will find that a lot more often than you think, where, something clashes, and it's not necessarily the people in the group's fault. It's not necessarily a fault at all. It's just, a clashing of ideas and
Right.
personalities. And so I found Sin City Witches, and I was absolutely floored. I didn't think there was that big of a gathering of witches out here. And the fact that I found them, I started, going to the gatherings. My husband was super happy that I'd found something. And then I do, I hang out with Marissa when I can. And it's absolutely amazing out here.
Nice. Well, I'm glad that you were able to find the group because, yeah, there's the Sin City Witches, and there's also one other group that also I believe it's called the Las Vegas Vortex.
Okay.
It's a I think of her name here in just a minute. I had spoken with her before I had a chance to meet with Marissa,
Mhm.
and they have they their gatherings are well, basically it comes down to a very large drum circle.
Oh, okay. Very
And
nice.
yeah, look up Las Vegas Vortex. You'll
Okay.
be able to learn more about it.
Yeah.
Um, and the, it is that thing goes on for like 2 to 3 days at a time.
Wow. Oh, that'd be so cool. It's funny, I've not heard of
Hmm.
that. I've heard of, because I'm a Celtic pagan, so there's a grove out here, actually, a Druid grove. And
Oh,
I
nice.
did try, like I said, I did a couple of meetings with them too. Like I said, great group of people. They are fantastic. It just wasn't the group for me.
Hmm.
So like I said, I'm really glad that I found Sin City Witches. It's a very eclectic mix of witches, and it's fantastic. I love it.
Yep, I know it is because after learning more about it from Marissa,
Mhm.
um, I I have not wanted to take a trip down there to Vegas for the longest time, but now that I know that there is a large community down there, yeah, and with airfare being as cheap as it is down to Vegas, I think I may have to wind up taking a trip.
Oh, that would be amazing. We'll have to meet up if you do that. I would love that.
Yeah, because that way I can uh, do some broadcasts on site down there and really connect with the community down there and see what everybody's up to.
Yes.
Let's see now. One of the last discussions that because myself and the Pagan Rights Coalition,
Mhm,
we have a series of roundtable discussions every Saturday night.
mhm,
And one of the conversations that we recently had, I've been kind of discussing this with other pagans, see what their take is on it.
mhm.
Uh, but what do you feel? Is there a difference in what you would think? Okay, approaching this wrong direction. As basically as a collective pagan
Mhm.
and solitary, what's your take on? Um, is there a difference between a soul and a spirit, or are they the same thing?
Ooh, I actually really like that question. There are a lot of the readings I've done, especially the book readings I've done, especially the most recent one I've been reading is Buckland's Guide to Spirit Communication.
Hmm.
That one does actually state that the soul is something different than a spirit. So a spirit is an outside entity. You can kind of lump ghosts in there, but I think Buckland was talking more about like deities, and I don't, for whoever believes in angels and demons, those would fall under the category of spirit as well. Nature spirits, elementals, and then ghosts and souls would be something a little bit different. And I actually did resonate a lot with that particular definition. I think that you can, I don't want to say necessarily ascend to spirit at some point, but I would be one of those people that definitely believes that souls and spirits are something a little different from each other.
Okay. So so in your opinion, would a person's soul and spirit, I mean, do they uh, do they resonate together while we're on this plane, or is it something totally different when you cross over?
I think it's a completely different plane. I think that the planes can definitely interact at certain times and in certain ways. I do think that they can kind of, I don't want to say intersect. That's not quite the right word, but kind of like brush
Mhm.
up against each other, especially for people are always talking about like Beltane and Samhain, how the veil between our world and the next is thinnest. So I do believe that they are separate planes of existence. I think that it's almost like an ascension. So when somebody
Mhm.
passes on, their spirit passes on to the next level, which would be whatever the spirit realm is.
Mhm.
Celtic pagans, or most Celtic pagans, I'm one of them, believe in something called the other world, where the gods reside, and your soul takes a rest while you are either waiting to be reincarnated, if you choose to be reincarnated, or you again, I don't want to use the word ascend, but you switch levels and go to being an ancestor or a guide for those that are living out their time on Earth.
Mhm.
So I do believe that
Okay.
there are separate planes of existence.
Okay. So basically, because you and I are pretty much on the same here, I believe, because
Mm.
uh, not only do I follow a eclectic path in
Mhm.
paganism, but I also have a Native American spiritual path that I follow as well.
Oh, wow.
And spirit with the Native American spirituality, yeah, uh, their belief is that every living thing has a spirit
Mhm.
and also a soul.
Mhm.
And so to me, soul is when you're talking about the body, spirit is when you're talking, basically spirit has to do with the mind. That's
Yes.
the way I look at it.
Yes. And I definitely, I would agree with that. I am one of those as well that believes that everything has a spirit to it. So the rocks, the earth, the water, the air. That's a practice I believe called animism,
Mhm.
and a lot of Celtic pagans, a lot of Norse pagans, a lot of you'll find. I think the older pagan religions like that do actually practice some form of animism in one form or another.
Okay.
Mhm.
Now, do you follow any kind of tradition?
Not really. Like I said, I'm pretty eclectic. So I do follow, like I said, the Celtic pantheon. So I worship not strictly, but mostly the Celtic gods. So like Breed or the Morrigan, Andagda, Lu. But as far as traditions go, I kind of pull from a lot of different places. So I do, as far as like my witchcraft practices go, I do like simmer pot spells and I do a lot of kitchen witchery. But then I'm also doing, like sweeping
Mhm.
spells and jar spells. And it just really kind of depends on my mood and what I think. Because I used to have like, for example, I used to have like a jar spell for attracting abundance, and then I decided it'd be
Mhm.
better as like a money bowl spell, so it didn't have like a lid on it to contain the energy. So
Right.
what I did is I adapted it to a bowl and just left it on my counter, so that way it kind of is constantly infusing the air with that energy in my home and kind of reprogramming the energy of my home a little bit.
Hmm. Nice. Now, with the let's see, let's talk about some of your writings that you've
Mhm,
done here, because uh, I'm kind of like you. I've also done several writings.
mhm,
Um, I haven't really got into them much. I mean, the main two that I think I've discussed the most are were the sermons I actually wrote for the local UU church back a few years ago.
Okay.
Uh, but one thing that I think you've got one here that I think a lot of people would discuss is don't fear the retrograde.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh, so I know a lot of people. I mean, uh, when it comes to retrogrades, everybody tends to really kind of go get up in arms about it,
Hmm.
and um, I'm like, okay, just because either Mercury or whatnot is in retrograde, uh, yeah, some people are kind of. I, the term I kind of want to say is, um, oh shoot, I've lost the term. Um, superstitious.
Mm.
There we go. That's what I'm looking for.
Hmm.
Um, and they're just superstitious about any retrograde. And it's like, okay, well, there are times that some things do happen that we can't really explain.
Hmm.
Uh, but to me, I'm not really one that's been superstitious about retrograde. So uh, tell us more about your writing here.
So, Don't Fear the Retrograde was basically tackling that subject. You see so many people that just kind of throw their arms up in the air and, well, it's the retrograde. So, this is going wrong and this is going wrong and everything's going wrong. And I'm like, okay, I understand it to a point. Certain things do tend to, especially with me, is my technology always goes on the fritz, especially during the retrograde. So, I understand to a point. But I think that some people, I don't want to say they take it too far, but I do think there's a little bit of superstition that goes into it. So I was trying to
Mhm.
tackle, here's what a retrograde is for, specifically for Mercury, how often it goes into retrograde, and how you can kind of use that information, like what sign it goes retrograde in, what sign it ends retrograde in, to kind of navigate through it basically. So I
Mhm.
think this new retrograde, we're actually in one right now. I believe it started on the 10th, and goes through like the 2nd or 3rd of June. It started in the sign of Gemini, which is funny because that is the sign of communication and all kinds of communication, written communication, text messaging, talking. So it went retrograde in the sign of Gemini and then is supposed to
Mhm.
go retrograde through the sign of Taurus. So, and I did a Facebook post about it, I think, too, where it kind of uh, suggested that maybe you need to take a look at the way you communicate with other people and communicate with yourself. I think that the time for retrograde is not necessarily a time for everything to go wrong. It's more a time of
Mhm.
reflection and introspection. So maybe take a look at the way you're communicating with people, how you communicate with other people. Could certain things be said better? Could you be treating yourself better with your internal communication and your internal dialogue? And then going into the sign of Taurus. Taurus, for those that don't know, is a very material sign. It's a very earthy sign. It has heavily influences on finances and things like that. So instead of thinking, oh, well, my finances are just going to be up in the air, maybe you could take a harder look at them and see maybe, and it's funny because my husband and I just did this, see maybe where you might be not necessarily losing money, but spending money where it doesn't need to be spent and kind of cut out things that you don't necessarily need. So that way you have more, financial
Mhm.
abundance to work with.
Interesting.
Mhm.
And what is your take? Is there's been some discussion on the blood moon.
Yes.
What's your take on the blood moon? Because for me, I've had a couple. For some odd reason, I don't ask me why, but my emotions just bottom out during a
Hmm.
blood moon. And I've kind of chalked it up with me being part wolf.
Okay.
Um, uh, I don't quote me on that, but that's what. I kind of chalk things up to. I have not really dove into it myself, but what's your intake on that?
So, from what I know, and I'm very, very amateur astrologist. I'm just kind of getting into it, so I
Hmm.
don't know too much about the blood moon. But what I do know is that, especially with, because there was a lunar eclipse too.
Hmm.
So it was a full moon, it was a lunar eclipse. So what I know about those two events is that typically for a full moon, emotions are running pretty high. Um, the fun thing that I always like to bring up to people is that scientifically the moon affects the tides and affects the way that they, come in and come out
Right.
on a day-to-day basis. And since we are mostly made of water, it seems almost nonsensical to maybe not believe that the moon has that kind of influence on us as well.
Hmm.
Since we're like I said, mostly water. So of course it would have some kind of effect on our emotions. At least in my mind, like I said, it makes sense to me. So
Right.
normally emotions are running pretty high. It's funny because statistically, there are more people in the hospital on a full moon than there are at any other time. Um, you'll see the numbers kind of ramp up during full moon more often than not. And then with the eclipse, it's funny that we were just talking about superstitions because the eclipses also are they're shrouded in superstition. So a lot of people will say
Right.
like, don't cast any spells, don't do any magic, do a lot of, again, self-reflection and introspection during an eclipse, especially a lunar eclipse, because while the full moon, energies are running really high and they're normally really great for pretty much whatever you want to do, the eclipse is seen as a very chaotic sort of energy, and you don't know what's going to happen or how the outcome's going to come about. So the best thing to do is to not charge. There's so many people nowadays that are charging their water for moon water and charging their crystals, and they say during an eclipse not to do that. So I actually have an article on that as well, and why that superstition kind of exists, and that goes back as far back as I can
Hmm.
find. There's a lot of, especially Hindu myths, I believe, about the eclipse. So it's pretty interesting. So kind of combining that with the blood moon, because I know that some moons have names depending on, so like April's pink moon is all based around a certain flower that blooms pink. Um,
Hmm.
so I know that some of the names don't necessarily have any effect on, I mean, they probably do, that I'm not aware of, on how the moon will affect people. But like I said, I'm not 100% positive on like blood moon versus pink moon versus, I just know like eclipses versus full moons versus solar eclipses and things like that.
Hmm.
So I'm working on that.
Okay. Well, I noticed that after the lunar eclipse last night, yeah, the moon was quite bright.
Yes, very much so. It was gorgeous. I loved every second of it.
And my friend Jessica is tuning in, and comment that she made that says that she must be broken because it brought her peace.
That's a really good point. That's the fun thing too. And like I said, this is something that I talk about a lot. Um, on my streams and my posts, no matter what I'm doing, it really honestly is going to affect everybody a different way. So for
Hmm.
some people, where the lunar eclipse might bring chaos into your life, for some people, it's a really peaceful time. For some people, maybe I don't know how many people are familiar with what's called a void of course moon, where basically the moon is not aspecting any planets in the sky. So typically there's some kind of aspect. So, like between Jupiter and the moon, or, there's typically some kind of correlation there. A
Hmm.
void of course moon means there's really no correlation between the placement of the moon and the placement of the other planets in the sky. So it's seen as a time where the energy is kind of low. I don't want to say necessarily dead, but it's basically stagnant energy. And so many people will say it's probably not the best time to cast around the void of course moon because it might not go anywhere. But you'll see that some people have a lot of success with that, just depending on, other factors. So there's always a lot of factors to take into consideration. I think, especially with astrology. Um, So I love that because I touch on that a lot. I say it all the time. It depends on who you are and where your charts are and, the energy levels you have and how that affect it depends on so many different things. And that's part of what I
Mhm.
love about this path is it's not 100% set in stone all the time.
Right. Now, you've also got another writing here, as the veil begins to lift. Now,
Mhm.
there's also been comments from people saying that, well, the veil basically is no more. There is no more veil.
Mhm.
But other people still say that it's there, but it's just right now the veil is thin, to the point where um, it's pretty much stayed the same.
Mhm.
Uh, Whereas on uh, with most everybody else, with All Hallows Eve, they say that's when it's the thinnest. But uh, I've heard a lot of other people say that the veil basically is no more.
I've heard of that. And I think it has to do with a lot of the astrological events we've had recently, especially the one where, what was it? We had Jupiter and Uranus and like four or five other planets, or well, three or four other planets all in the same house
Hmm.
for a while. And it was supposed to be like this really lucky time and this time of this, just great energy shift and things like that. So I think a lot of the astrological events we've had over the last probably 2 years, honestly, have really affected that particular belief system. I myself think that there's not I think it's still there. I do believe it is thinner. I don't think it's really ever going to go away. I think it's there to serve a purpose because we're not ready to see what's on the other side just yet. And for those that
Hmm.
are, that's where you get your clairvoyance, your clairsentience, the clairs from is because they're ready to receive the information from that side. Um, on some sort of level, but not everybody's ready to see what's on the other side just yet or to hear or to know what's there. So I think that, again, there's a lot of superstition around that, but it has to do a lot with, like I said, the astrological events and lining up with, current, not just political events, but the current events, that stand across the world. I think a lot of people are looking for answers, I think,
Hmm.
and looking for where they're going to be able to find those answers.
Okay, interesting. Now, let's see. We've got a couple other topics we're going to be touching on. I'm going to take a quick commercial break, and we're going to be hearing from our sponsors. But don't go nowhere because we're going to be right back right after these messages. So don't go nowhere.
I just walked into this coffee shop. You'll never guess what I found. All the help is deeply engrossed in metaphysical science. You should too. I'm at the Egyptian, 475 Park Avenue in Idaho Falls, Idaho. You get your very own coffee for free, and we're open till 10.
Sister Moon, Apothecary and More is a collaboration of local island witches bringing you handcrafted tools for ritual, amazing apothecary, custom vinyl work, merchandise, and so much more. But we are not just an online store. We are a sisterhood, a platform, and a voice for everything that is magical. Join us for our famous Tarot Tuesdays from 11 to 4 Eastern Standard Time for a discounted reading with our amazing in-house intuitive reader and priestess, Wolf Spirit Energy, Beverly Oberlin. You can find us on Facebook at Sister Moon Store or on the web at sistermoon.shop. So fly on over and stop in for a spell.
All right, we are back with our special guest, Amanda Mallard. And one question I was going to ask you here, um, what is, how do you address people who are still stuck on the old stigmatism of pagans and how we do things, and because there's still a lot of people out there who tend to be stuck on the old dogma of what the church has instilled upon people, who we are and what we do. Uh, so how do you respond to something like that?
I honestly, I used to respond pretty angrily. I used to be really reactive as far as that goes because, obviously I'm not evil. I don't worship any evil entities. I don't do anything wrong or bad to other people. So it was really, for a while, it was really hurtful. You'd get all these movies where the witches were demonically possessed or equated to demons, and my husband, it's funny, my husband still gets mad about it, like for me to this day, which I find really sweet. Anymore, I tend to laugh it off, and just let them know. I'm like, look, not everything is as black and white as you want it to be. And then I'll just let them know. I'm like, I have friends that are, Mormon and Christian, and I have friends from pretty much all over. And I just let them know. I'm like, look, I'm still here. I'm not evil. If you ever have any questions, feel free to ask because I will not hesitate to answer any you might have.
Yeah, I'm glad that a lot of us have pretty much the same, handle things pretty much the same way to help educate others
Mm-hmm.
who may not know exactly who we are, what we do, and just to kind of do away with that old dogma. But it's always funny for me, especially I had one day where I had one of the Jehovah's Witnesses come up to me and start asking me questions and whatnot, and I explained to him who I am and what I do. He said, "Oh, okay. Have a good day." Okay, see ya.
I had a friend of my mom's, because I wear a pentagram, and she looked at me and she goes, "Oh, I thought you weren't Jewish. Why are you wearing a Star of David?" And I kind of looked at her and I'm like, it's not,
Um,
it's not. And she goes, "Oh, what is it?" And I'm like, it's a pentagram. And she goes, "Oh."
yeah. Well, for one thing, Star David has a couple more points than what.
Right, exactly. I think I love it because I honestly think it was just her trying to start a conversation about it. And then
Mhm.
once I told her what it was, I was super straightforward about it. She just didn't know how to handle
Yeah.
it.
uh, yeah. Same way. Like,
Yeah.
uh, yeah. I don't know. I
I
mean,
think
sometimes
part of
some of the conversations can be just downright comical, I think.
Yes. And I agree with that. And like you said, a lot of that has to do with the old stigmas that are still kind of lingering around. But the best that we can do is just let them know, whoever has any questions, whoever might have any of those stigmas. I tell, as many people as I can, I'm like, anger is not going to get you anywhere. The best thing to do is just to let them know that you're here and to answer any questions they might have.
Yep.
And if they don't have any questions, then, let them be on their way because, they're not going to, nothing you say is going to change their mind if they're not willing to ask questions. That's what I've learned.
Hmm. Yep. Now, one of the other topics that I see that you've covered here about spiritual insecurity.
Yes.
Give us a little bit of rundown on this one.
So that one was super fun for me to write, actually. So sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes I worry, mostly for my daughter. So my daughter is turning 7. She's actually turning 7 in 2 days. She's super excited. But I worry because she's already seen as different. She's got the autism, she's got the ADHD, so she's already seen as different from her peers. And I look at my husband sometimes and I'm like, baby, wouldn't it just be easier if I was, if I was Christian, if I was one of these mainstream religions? And he goes, no, honey, it wouldn't be easier because you wouldn't be yourself. You wouldn't be who you are. And I've really had to kind of struggle with that a little bit. And I think
Mhm.
it's something that is not talked about a lot. And I just kind of wanted to address it for those people that may have been going through it at some time too. I'm much more secure in my spirituality now, but getting here took a long time. It was always second guessing myself. And well, maybe I'm just, maybe I'm just crazy. Maybe that wasn't really a sign from whoever I thought it was a sign from. Maybe it's just my imagination. Maybe just little things like that. And I just wanted to let people know that they're not alone. And that they'll get through it, and that it's a sign of spiritual growth, I think. And I think everybody goes through it at some point or another. So I just wanted to kind of address that and let them know, like I said, that they're not alone.
So what are some of the current projects that you've got going on?
So I do, like I said, I do stream on Twitch. I believe it's just Head Witch Hallow. If you look at it on Twitch, I do Wednesdays one week, and then I do Fridays and Saturdays the next week. So I kind of alternate between the weeks to kind of keep my time free. I'm currently working on building my YouTube channel back up. So I had a YouTube channel that I started probably about 3 or 4 years ago, but it was linked to my personal email address. In the process, this last year, I've been trying to switch everything over to my new email address for, either Head Witch Hallow or Hallow's Cauldron. And so I tried to switch my YouTube channel from my personal to my my business email. It did not work the way I thought it would. And it ended up deleting all 4 years of content that I had.
Oh, shoot.
So I'm currently working on filming an intro video and starting that back up again. And it's going to be a little bit more geared towards, because the content was so old. I used to be called Daenerys on Twitch because I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan. Daenerys is my favorite character. So I used to call myself Daenerys, but it felt really gimmicky and it wasn't really who I was as a person. So I rebranded everything. So I have everything back from when I was Daenerys, like I said, 3 or 4 years ago on that YouTube channel. So I'm kind of on some level glad it imploded because I can kind of start fresh, but it's going to be a pain.
If that would have happened to me, I would have been like, oh crap.
I was so mad. I text my mom, I text my husband, and they're like, what happened? And I'm like, I don't know, but it's gone. It's all gone. So I lost it for a minute there. So I'm working on that. I'm working on a couple of blog posts. Actually, I'm trying to get a couple out a week. So I'm trying to get to that point where I'm writing and finishing a couple of weeks so I can just, schedule them out. I'm trying to think about what else I have going on. What I'm trying to do is I'm also trying to start a Patreon. I'm not sure what the tiers or anything are going to be just yet, but really it's just a way for people. It's going to be a way for people to support the Twitch channel, the YouTube channel, the content that I'm currently trying to make. And I'm going to add things in like tarot readings. So I can not only practice tarot for myself, but I find that I get a lot of people asking me for tarot readings. That's like, if they're really accepting of the witch thing, that's like the first thing they ask for is if you can do a reading for them, I've found. And I'm like, I wouldn't mind doing that. I'm not so great at the face-to-face tarot readings just yet, but I can actually, if I can take some time and sit down with the cards, then I can, type out an email or record myself talking about each card that way and send it out. So I'm planning on doing something like that. I've been thinking about, I'm kicking the idea around of becoming a spiritual coach. So kind of like a life coach, but on the spiritual level for people. A lot of people, yes, Jessica, I have definitely found that as well. I found a lot of people will not accept me, and I'm perfectly fine with, letting them go at that point, because really, honestly, if they're not going to accept you for who you are, they weren't accepting you to begin with. They were accepting a version of you that they found palatable.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've also found that same thing. Either basically I leave it up to them. People can either accept me for who I am and what I do, or if not, fine. See ya.
Exactly. Because I would rather be myself than be palatable for somebody else.
Right.
But that's taken me a long time to get even there. If you'd met me even, 3 or 4 years ago, I would not have been the same person I am now. I've experienced a lot of stuff that has helped me grow as a person, I think. But so I am working on at the moment, it's just kind of kicking the idea around, like how I would do it, where I would start, things like that. But I do want to kind of level up into the position of spiritual coach, because I think that, and I saw a YouTube video from another coach about this. Oh, excuse me, where we have, basically they were saying that we have three bodies. We have the physical body, we have the mental body, and then we have the spiritual body, or the energetic body. And the first two, I mean, for the most part, are pretty well maintained for most people. But the spiritual one tends to be neglected by almost everybody.
Right.
It's not really the first thing that people think of. So I want to be that person that kind of helps cultivate and helps, enrich the spiritual body as much as people are there for the mental and the physical bodies as well.
Okay. So that's basically going back to where we'd started off. Because here again, so we've got metaphysical stores out there that basically go by mind, spirit, and body.
Yes.
And here again, that's going back to the discussion that we had on Roundtable. The funny part about it is that we got to a point where we were finding clarity among this question, and the universe decided to shut us down.
Oh.
To the point it said, okay, you've learned enough, you know enough, you're done discussing this.
It's like, no more. You're getting too close to something there.
Right. And because we had this discussion out, because we had to end the roundtable because all of a sudden everything started going haywire.
Oh my gosh.
And so we ended it about a half hour early, and we got into a discussion afterward. We kind of chalked it up to universe saying, okay, you're approaching on something that we don't want you talking about. So they said, nope, you're done. And decided to pretty much shut us down. It's like, oh man.
I love it.
So it's like, but we did come to some sort of clarity on basically if each body has okay, so basically we're talking about the spiritual, physical being, the spiritual, the body being the soul, mind being the spirit, and then that third aspect of it as well. So I guess as for a spiritual coach, that you're going to be dealing with a lot of this.
I would think so. And I'm ready for the challenge, and I'm really excited for it. Because I think that, and this is something too, especially with just witchcraft, like as a practice for witchcraft, you see a lot of people that kind of push away the spiritual aspects of witchcraft. Right. It's just a practice. It's basically just science that we don't understand yet. It's not quite, what people like me think it is, where it's a spiritual journey and it's a spiritual path. So I'm one of those people that I use witchcraft as a way to enrich myself spiritually, and to learn more, not only about myself, but about the universe. And it seems almost, like I said, that there is a section of people, or a sect of people, that are trying to really push away from the spiritual aspects of witchcraft, which I understand, because a lot of people will just equate, spiritualism or spirituality with the three or four, however many there are now, main religions, with, Christianity being one of them. And they don't want to be associated with, the religious aspect of that, which I definitely understand. But I think that for me, like I said, there's something very spiritual about witchcraft. And it's been an eye-opener for me, around, for the world around me, and for myself, and for the people around me. So I just want to help. I just want to help people who might see it as something that they need to explore. And I want to help enrich people where I can, because, like I said, the spiritual body, whatever that is, that energetic body that we have, is so it's so neglected in the world that we live in, and I think that more people would benefit if they learned to pay a little bit more attention to it.
Right. I would agree there. And so basically, uh, with the area that you're in and basically being in the middle of a very large community down there, which, like I said, it still kind of took me by surprise when I learned about this. But uh, so being in the kind of environment that you're in, how do you celebrate your like the sabbats and rituals?
So I do most of the Sabbats by myself. Sometimes I'll incorporate my daughter into them. It really kind of depends because we're trying to raise her with a very open mind.
Hmm.
So she knows, Mama's a witch. She knows that Mama doesn't really believe in maybe what everybody else believes in, but she also knows that she's free to believe in whatever she wants to. So we, my husband and I sat down and had a discussion. Like, if my daughter asks me questions or asks to participate, that's fine, as long as I'm not, forcing it on her, basically.
Right.
But for the most part, I do celebrate the Sabbats by myself. So like for Midsummer, which is coming up, or Letha, for those that know it by that name, I'm going to be leaving out offerings for the Fae. I'm going to be doing just a little summer celebration, kind of probably hang out by the pool a little bit, but make sure that, and for those that don't know, the reason why you would leave offerings for the Fae around Midsummer, around Letha, is to not necessarily invite them into your space, but to make sure that if they're in your space, they don't cause any mischief.
Right. Because
So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, well, it's, and that's a whole other topic, I think, is
oh
the
yeah,
topic
it
of the
is.
Fae and
I've
offerings.
learned
Yes.
because basically I've learned that, especially with the Fae community,
Mhm.
Fae folk, that you want to be more inviting and welcoming to them,
Yes.
because you don't want to really cross the Fae folk, is
No.
there will be consequences.
Yes. And what a lot of people, and that's what I love partially about the Fae community, is because they really seem to understand this. What a lot of people don't know, or maybe have forgotten, is that the Fae, that most people recognize from, Irish mythology, they were deities at one point. They were gods. And so
Mhm.
they expect to be treated as such. And I mean,
Mhm.
I have no qualms with treating them as such personally, because I'm like, yeah, I understand. Please.
Yeah.
So that's what I'll be doing for Letha. Like I said, nothing too big. But I mean, for some of the Sabbats, I make this big old celebration, and I cook as much as I can. I leave offerings on my altars for my deities. I have multiple altars. So I've got an ancestors altar. I've got one in my bedroom, dedicated for my magical workings and to the goddess Morrigan. And then I've got a altar in my kitchen, set up for the goddess Breed. There's several pronunciations for that name. Technically, that one should be one of the closer to proper ones, but for those that don't know, it's Bridget. A lot of people will say Bridget
Mhm.
or Saint Bridget. That's the goddess I'm talking about.
Cool. Now, when it comes to people that are asking where to basically, for someone just starting out, what
Mhm.
would be your input for, or what would be your best advice for someone who's just getting started?
I always tell people the best thing to do is to read. And I know there's a lot of material out there, but basically what you want to do is sit with yourself. And it doesn't have to be for, a year or 2 years or however long people will tell you to sit for yourself. Sit with yourself for a while and recognize why you want to be on this path, what exactly it is that calls you to this path, and then what interests you. Are you interested in mythology? Are you interested in, herbology and plants? Are you interested in, are you really good at cooking and baking? And maybe you'd be into kitchen witchery then, or, little things like that. Your interests and what you like to do and what you like to read on will kind of lead you to where you should be practicing, but to where you might want to start your practice. So I always tell people, if you're into herbs, if you're into plants, green witchery is a great place to look and to start. But you don't have to limit yourself. You don't have to limit yourself. You don't have to label yourself. Read whatever you can. Talk to other people if you can find them, and see what they practice and why. And kind of, like I said, because this is a spiritual path, it's an enriching thing. So you want to enrich yourself with other people's belief systems as well. Maybe not necessarily take them on, but understand why they believe that way and why they practice that way. So for me, I've always been a little all over the place, and done a little bit of everything. So eclectic witch made sense. So I do a little bit of kitchen witchery. I do some of the green witchcraft. I do a lot of, like I said, the jar spells and the bowl spells. But it really just, that's what I tell people. I'm like, read, but start with where your interests are. Are you more interested in tarot cards or astrology? Are you more interested, like I said, in the plants? If you're not really into reading that much, there are blogs you can look up. One of my favorites is learnreligions.com. It's funny because there's not a lot of witchcraft blogs out there. There's some,
True,
but there's not a lot, which is why I started my blog, not only for the book reviews and discussions like that, but for the witchcraft community as well. Because there seems to be either an overload of information or a complete lack of it. And there's doesn't seem to be any happy medium.
No, there really isn't. And we're also dealing with inaccurate information that's out there as well.
Yes, very much
that seems
so.
to be the biggest problem.
Yes. And it's weird because I'm not sure how all of it started, but I've seen a lot of it. And it boggles my mind. I'm like, where did this start? How did this catch on like this? That doesn't make any sense.
Right, I know. That's one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing here. I've been doing this since 2012. And this has been all about making sure that I'm putting out positive information, correct information, and to get information out about our basically everybody in the community who either does writings, does books, music, whatnot, so that information can be put out in front of everybody, and so that people have good and correct knowledge to begin with.
Right. Because it's so important. There's, like you said, there's so much information that's going around that's just not right. And there's so many misconceptions. And like we were talking about, there's so much stigma around what it is to be a witch and what it is to be a pagan that's still there. I think that what you're doing is extremely important. And that's what I wanted to do too, is just let people know, that there are good places to find information, where to find the good information, how to, sort out the good information from the bad information, and protect themselves, because there are so many people that claim to be a part of this community that are really just looking to take advantage of people and line their own pockets. And not to say that business is based around the craft and based around paganism. I'm not saying anything bad about that. I think that if you're starting a business, great, do that. But like I said, you got to be aware, because it's just like any other business. There's going to be people that are just in it for themselves, and you got to be careful and be aware of how to spot that.
Exactly. Okay. I want to thank you for taking time out to join me today, and I'll definitely be keeping in touch. Who knows? You are more than welcome to join me on any future broadcasts as well, if you'd like to.
Sounds good. I would love to. This is a new experience for me, but I absolutely love it. So I'm more than willing to come back.
Cool. Appreciate that. All right. We've been talking with Amanda Mallard, and she has got her own website, hollowscauldron.com, where you can find a lot of good information on her website, with a lot of her writings that she's done, her blog posts. And let's see, the Head Witch Hollow, I believe that is your blog post site.
Yes.
Okay. And then Hollow's Cauldron is your main one. Then you can also find her on Facebook under Amanda R. Mallard, and or she's got a bunch of information on there as well. If you ever want to touch base with her, get to know her more, I'm sure that she'd be more than happy to answer your questions that you have.
Yes.
And as well, if you have questions for me, uh, always send me a message on Facebook. Um, you can message me directly through IAPN Radio on Facebook, through our website, iapnradio.net. Um, we've got a lot more going on here over the next several months. Uh, Things have been kind of ramping up and getting busy here at IAPN Radio, which uh, is always appreciated. So, with that being in mind, be sure to get outside while the weather is good. We've been having some really nice weather, although I think it's going to storm again tonight here, but we'll wait and see. As always, keep everyone safe around you. Thank you for tuning in, and we do appreciate it a lot. Again, be sure to join up with our Facebook page and group for IAPN Radio, where you can be kept up to date as to what we have going on here. So pleasant journeys, everyone, and we're going to be talking with everyone here again here soon. Have a good day, and we are out of here.